Hello, everyone. Welcome to the User Testing Hi World Conference. Hope you've been enjoying your talk so far. Today, we're going to be talking about how to engage stakeholders in a virtual and global world, which is super relevant for today as we all work from home and have to work with people all over the world. So let me just give a little bit of an introduction about myself. My name is Crystal, and I'm a senior UX researcher currently at Zendesk. Before Zendesk, I used to work at Spotify and Accenture Interactive, where I help different Fortune 500 companies improve their customer experiences. And when I'm not busy interviewing participants, you can also find me as a blogger at Vegan Eats NYC on Instagram. So today, let's go ahead and get started since you're all here for our 30 minutes of fun. So first things first, let's learn about Zendesk. This is where I work, and this is where we work super globally and with different people every day. So Zendesk is a customer service platform. We power a lot of different customer experiences for some of your favorite brands. We deal a lot with customer service, and our best practices are really built into our products. This is what the interface looks like here, and it's pretty awesome. We have a bunch of different products from messaging, email, SMS, voice, community. We also have a bot. And overall, just really an awesome product to help you design customer service. This is how Zendesk works. We are incredibly global. And as you can see, we have offices on all the different regions. So I personally am based out of the San Francisco office. Here I am in my little dot here. But my manager, she lives in Singapore over here in the APAC region. My stakeholders are really commonly in the APAC region and also the EMEA region. So it's pretty common for me to have an early morning with EMEA, where my 8:30 a.m. is their 4:30 p.m., for example. And a 6 p.m. meeting with APAC is a 9 a.m. meeting in Singapore. So all of this kind of depends on daylight savings, which can make things better or worse. But overall, Zendesk's international presence really makes this more fun and makes it a stronger place to work because we get to figure out creative ways to work asynchronously and remotely. So this is my way of going to share some of the tips I've been able to do while working here. So let's think about the research process overall, and we're going to get started with scoping first. So this is Fiona. She's our Zendesk designer in Melbourne, Australia. She's awesome. She really wants to run a study testing some of our new designs that she made for her answer bot, which is our Zendesk AI chatbot. So the way she's going to do this is that she's going to log into our UX Research Help Center to find out how to work with the Zendesk research team. So this is a screenshot of what that help center looks like. Essentially, it has a search function where she can look up different topics. She can kind of learn more about the different ways she can do research here and about how to get help from us. At this point, she could easily Slack us to figure out how we can help her, but really we want to empower our stakeholders to self-serve first. So Fiona knows this, so that's why she logs into this UX Research Help Center. And this is powered by Zendesk, of course, and it helps her find out how to execute the study. This help center specifically was built out by our operations team to make it easier for stakeholders to find information about how to access researchers, how to execute projects, and how to find resources. Stakeholders can find the answers to their most commonly asked questions, like how do I recruit for this study? Or how do I request research help? And all of this reduces the extra touch points stakeholders have when they need their questions answered quickly. With researchers spread across different time zones, the Help Center makes this really easy to self-serve. So in this case, Fiona then finds a relevant article and reads about how to work with actually one of our researchers. So as she searches for that Help Center to remember how to work with us, she finds this article like this one that's on the screen here that really outlines everything she needs to do to work with us. So after reading through these materials, she actually submits a ticket to the UX research team via a form. This form helps us quickly gather information about the project, like who's involved, the topic, the timeline, and all that kind of stuff. And all these tags and fields are actually super helpful when it comes to reporting at the end of the quarter to help track the appetite of UX research at Zendesk. So not only does it help organize us, but it helps kind of, gather knowledge about who wants research at Zendesk. So now I'm back in the story. It's me, your friendly UX researcher in San Francisco. So as a reminder, Fiona is in Melbourne. She submitted a ticket to us, and this is my view here. We have our views organized in this way, and I can specifically see the tickets that are relevant to me and the projects here. So I'm reading through the tickets, and then this ticket model really allows us to make sure that research requests don't get lost in Slack conversations and one-off comments. It also really makes it easy for the team to see who's working on what. So I review her request, and then I decide, awesome, this is a project I can definitely do for her. I'll be handling this from here. And now Fiona helped scope that project for us, and now we're in that kickoff phase. So here, this is where I get started in working. I spin up a project page to make it really easy for this project to be tracked. For every new research project, we actually spin up a Confluence page, and this is a template of what that looks like that's shown here. That makes it easy for stakeholders to see the background of the study, what phase is in, which participants are part of it, the status, and all that good stuff. Any relevant links like test plans and scripts are actually linked here for easy reference. And we also upload all of our findings to the digital asset system to make it easy to find insights all in one place. So in general, this makes it super easy so we don't have to duplicate any communication and we can be transparent in our work. After that, I also am spinning up a Slack channel. So in addition to that Confluence page, which has lots of awesome documentation, I'm going to create this specific Slack channel that's for more informal communication and updates. I'll invite Fiona and all the other relevant stakeholders that are involved to join the project and stay updated. So kind of done with a little bit of that documentation part of the research planning process. And now we're going to get to that writing of the test plan and all that good stuff here. So the way we work together, me and Fiona, is that we're actually going to be connecting asynchronously as I plan the study, write the script, and recruit. So it's really easy, I think, for most of us to get heads down during a project and really want to focus on writing the study in detail. But I want to keep the team updated as much as possible and be involved with their work to make sure they feel part of that as well. So I'll attend Fiona's team meetings, I'll set up recurring one-on-ones and share all my in-progress documentation with her. We use Google Docs for the test materials, which makes it super easy to collaborate virtually using these comments and inline editing. And that way everything is documented and we won't miss anything. And so we also make sure that Slack is our main way of communicating with each other. And there are a couple settings that I want to tell you all about to make sure that it's enabled properly so you can work most successfully together. So I think to meet your stakeholders where you are, it's good to set up boundaries and make it easier for you to communicate without the pressure of waiting for someone to log on. Fiona's in Melbourne, which is actually a 17-hour time difference for me. So I don't want to make sure I'm messaging her and waiting for her to respond, but it's like her 4 a.m. That's not fair to anyone. So here are some of the settings I've been able to make sure we respect each other's time, yet stay connected. So here you can see that you're able to schedule your messages in advance. You just, next to that little send button, there's that little drop down, and you can schedule a message for tomorrow, for Monday. You can even set a custom time in 30-minute increments. You can also set up donuts, which makes it a little bit more informal way of communicating with each other. The donut can prompt different questions that kind of help break the ice between you and the team members. So you can put that in the Slack channel to keep people engaged and just kind of a lighter way of keeping in touch. We use Geekbot as another addition for our Slack, where essentially we can use it as a stand-up so people can connect remotely and really talk to each other without having to meet for 30 minutes every day, for example, to learn what everyone's going on. And finally, also, if you just click on someone's profile, you can see their local time. So you never have to really worry that you don't know what time it is there. You don't really have to install anything else. It's right there. It's my manager. It's 5:54 for her when I took this screenshot. So making sure that I won't expect a response because she's not working at this time. But yeah, these are just a couple of the features that I think make it really easy to work together. Next is Google Calendar. I know, super innovative. It's pretty basic, but actually there's a couple settings that I want you to be aware of, similar to Slack, that make it so much easier to work. So Fiona wants to set up a meeting with me. I want her to make sure she knows that I'll be around during that time. So in my settings here, I set my working hours so she knows when she can or can't work with me and when I'll be available to have any meetings. I set up time zones in my calendar so you can actually display different time zones that's relevant to you. And you can also show a world clock so you can see all the different time zones you want to keep track of. As I mentioned before, I work a lot with APAC and Melbourne specifically and Singapore specifically, so I make sure all those times are captured here. And if you don't really want to use Google Calendar or using a different kind of feature, there's another additional kind of plugin that you can get for your computer that I use called Clocker. It's just an add-on for my Mac where at the top on your bar up here, you'll be able to have a drop down and be able to track all the different time zones that are relevant to you. And really, to personalize the communication, I will often record my screen with a voiceover to avoid those extra meetings. So I know it's very common to be like, hey, you here, want to chat quickly? When you're working globally, a lot less easy to do that. So I use a feature called Cloud App. It is also now available in Slack itself, that they have a feature where you can record your voice and video to send to your stakeholders. But I use a third-party one called Cloud App just because we've been doing that for a while. So in this case, Fiona and I will Slack, we'll set up meetings and work through Google Docs together. But oftentimes I do a lot of videos with voiceovers. When you want to explain something and it's just easier to do it over the phone, this is kind of that function right here, but it also has an audio option, but you can also have your face. It really depends on how personalized you want to make it. So what I'll do is I'll send a recording of my screen with the voiceover on what I'm trying to explain, rather than writing into words and waiting until our next meeting. And then I'll send these videos via Slack, so then Fiona in the next time zone can watch it and get context and learn about what I was thinking while I'm asleep in the US. And if planning all that, your settings, setting that up, it's all kind of a one-time thing usually. So you have that all set up. But something that I do for each and every project is that when I'm planning, I make sure I document all the meetings and readouts that I need to have. So this is just a sample of what that looks like. I'll have the type of meeting that I want to have, the time zones that I have to consider, the date as it gets scheduled, the different people that I want to invite. So because I want to make sure that I capture everyone, and because I'm working across these different time zones through different national holidays and different regions, I want to plan ahead. I want to know that if I want to get with someone, I have to get on their calendar early. And this kind of just helps organize my thoughts around everyone's global schedules to make sure any key meetings I don't have to wait on, or that it won't be a surprise for anybody. And even if I'm not sending this meeting up right away as soon as I start the project, it just kind of helps me track what needs to happen and when. All right, so we talked about how to plan, we talked about how to scope. Now let's actually execute this study here. So once I'm ready to execute the study, I make sure Fiona feels plugged in. So I invite all of my participants that I may be interviewing to a shared Google Calendar. And then this calendar is specifically only for research and all the different research sessions that we run here at Zendesk. So anyone who adds it to their calendar can see these in their own calendar as an add-on. When they don't want to see it, they can just uncheck the box and it won't appear on their calendar. What's really great about this feature, I believe, is that you can see these times in your local time zone. So there's no need to like completely convert all your meetings and saying like, hey, we have an interview at 3 p.m. Pacific or 7 p.m. in Melbourne or stuff, or that kind of communication. You don't have to translate that all the time if they see the calendar in their own version. In addition, if any participants reschedule or anything, it's right there ready and everyone can have access to it without having to invite each stakeholder individually. And this is a way for stakeholders to kind of know what's happening and kind of jump in when they're able to. It also integrates nicely with Slack, and in your Slack channel, you can just have it update directly. So anyone in the channel can see like, hey, there's an event happening, and just know that this calendar is connected together. And make sure that when you are adding this calendar, you just have the setting access, that you make it available for Zendesk or for your company itself, so that they can add it freely without having to bother you for that invite. And even though I said you don't have to translate all the time, we still often do, just because we want to be inclusive. So in our messaging, when I say like, hey, interviews are happening this week in our shared Slack channel, I'll make sure I kind of include any key dates or times in that time zone, so it doesn't feel like I'm just talking about me. I love it when my stakeholders join my research sessions, so I want to make sure it's easy for everyone to know what research is happening when and where. Everyone has that Google Calendar and it's there, but sometimes you want to encourage them because people get busy, right? So in the Slack message, you'll be like, hey, there's a session happening this time, like come through, here are the different time zones. And it makes it really easy to get people excited about research when you have this kind of messaging. Thankfully though, Fiona always signs up to be a note taker for all my sessions. So this helps kind of remind her that something is coming up and she's going to help me out. And I think in general, having your stakeholders at your sessions and having them be active note takers makes them feel more engaged in your work. It also helps you later when you're trying to analyze everything and saying like, oh man, did I miss something? And not having to go back and watch everything in full. I also let them sign up to be a note taker on that Confluence page. So again, everything is all in one place. And once the actual study is happening itself, I'll always have a virtual room to allow Fiona and others to join in. So you can obviously invite them directly to that meeting, whether you're hosting it via Zoom, via Google, really doesn't matter. You can just invite them to that calendar and they can kind of join in themselves. I suggest that they take their video and audio off so they kind of feel more behind the scenes. And often sometimes you can also change the name to note taker so that people don't feel like there's a bunch of eyes watching them. And by people, I mean the participants. So that's one way where our stakeholders can join and still feel behind the scenes without pressuring the participant and feeling like there's 10 people watching them. Fiona loves to hear directly from the user, and I want her to have that chance to ask questions during the interview. So after my initial questions are asked, I'll always give her some room to ask her questions about anything that happened during that session, so she feels more involved. But of course, keeping that anonymity and making sure there's no pressure to the participant. And once you have those sessions live, if someone couldn't make it, always share the recordings as long as there's no private information that's being shared out loud, and making it easy for people to watch in their own time. And I think it's also important to make it easy to stay updated on the study in many different ways. So they can join the sessions, obviously, and have the links to everything, but I also like to make sure that all the recordings are easily available. So that's through Confluence. You can see that I have the Zoom link here, and then I'll have also the video and transcript links available afterwards. I'll include details about the participants so people know who they're talking to as they get through it. And through Slack, I also include daily memos where essentially I just pull some relevant quotes or some really interesting facts that came up during my interview. They're not analyzed insights. They're just a way for stakeholders to kind of join in quickly and be like, oh, cool, the study is happening. And these are some things that people are learning while I'm doing my other work. This way, even if people can't make it to the interview themselves, they still get a general understanding of what users are thinking. And finally, now we've executed our study, and let's get to that good old analysis and synthesis. So once I finish my interviews, I want to make it easy for Fiona and the team to learn more about what I'm doing in analysis. I think it's easy to sometimes quickly get all your information and quickly want to understand everything, and then you forget about updating your stakeholders, and people want to stay involved while you're doing your analysis. So, and I also never want my insights to be a surprise. So I make sure stakeholders are involved throughout the analysis process. Some ways I do this is that I'll host screening parties or where I have clips from customer interviews. And I even hosted one that was more of a cinematic viewing experience where I've had a voiceover with a shadowing session that I did, so people can watch a shadowing session sped up with me kind of announcing and talking and narrating over what was happening. I clipped those interviews together, and then I hosted three different time zones. I hosted viewing parties so that everyone kind of had a chance to watch it live with me. They really enjoyed that session, and it's great that I was around to kind of host that, have that extra context if they had additional questions. And I think that little extra work makes people feel really involved, and it goes a long way. But of course, there's other ways of getting people involved, even during analysis and outside as just as a research organization, setting up office hours for any ad hoc questions, having pre-recorded research materials in our help center, like our power hours, to make it easy for people to learn about research and how it works at Zendesk. And of course, if there are ways you can bring your stakeholders in to kind of workshop together with you, it's always such an amazing way for people to kind of get their hands dirty with the research. We use a lot of whiteboarding tools, and I know there's a lot out there in the market. We personally use Miro, and we really love it. And some things that we do are like workshops and dot voting and clustering all our data together and just kind of in general collaborating. Since I don't, again, as I said, I don't want my insights to be a surprise. Having a format of a workshop like this makes it easy for people to know what's going on and feel part of any synthesis that we do. And it doesn't really matter which tool you use as long as you kind of just get together and talk. Cool. And now we're wrapping up. So once the study is wrapped up, it's important to vocalize and provide cross-functional updates. Like, bam, we're done with our research project. Now what? We want people to know about it. So Fiona was super excited about everything we learned, and I want to make sure everyone knows about the good work we did. So we'll create video clips after every project called Moment of Zen, where we'll share what our users are saying about Zendesk to a distributed and wider audience. We also provide a weekly update in Slack that's a little bit more informal and small ways to kind of get our artifacts that we use shared across the organization of people who may not be involved in the project and know what's going on. We also want our insights to be accessed out of the study. So we have our quarterly insights that we share at any all hands and team meetings in general. So these are just kind of the roll up of the main things that we learned that we think is worth for other people to learn about. So I want everyone to learn about everything that we did because it's super helpful for the rest of the organization. And then all these documents in our digital asset library, which is powered by Binder. So that makes it easy to search and makes it easy for our project to exist beyond just this one. And finally, we give thanks where thanks is due. I just talked about a lot of information here, and a lot of work goes into any project. So just making sure that people feel appreciated. This technically isn't part of every research project officially, but I think my #1 way of engaging with stakeholders is just kind of give thanks for the hard work. We can, of course, send a quick message via Slack or just kind of personally just say, hey, thanks for doing awesome work with us. But we also like public love here at Zendesk. So we use the Slack channel Creative Kudos to kind of give thanks to everyone who works really hard. Here's an example of someone who thanked me and it made me feel really good. And finally, I've been talking about what Fiona's been saying a lot, but I wanted y'all to hear directly from her. She really she loves research and she thinks it's super helpful when people hear directly from the customers. And so she's had a really great experience with us and she's glad she was able to share this hypothetical scenario with you. And although the story did have a happy ending, there's just some things I want you to keep in mind when you do work globally, just because even though it's not always sunshine and rainbows here, so we want to remember that language and cultural barriers are a thing, right? We want to make sure that any research we do globally, we localize the place and make sure that any languages that we consider. Sometimes there are some long days, I won't lie to y'all. When you're working in both, as I said, in EMEA and APAC, sometimes you're there from the early morning to a later evening. So just kind of keeping in mind and balancing and making sure you put up boundaries for what meetings you can and can't have. And of course, just because we work with our stakeholders globally doesn't mean we can forget about our audience. So if we are a global company focusing on a wider audience, don't just recruit in one region, think about the rest of the world. And kind of to just wrap this all up here, these are like the top 3 tips to stay engaged with a global audience. There are a lot of different things that I shared, different tools, different settings to adjust, but these are the kind of 3 main things I think we can all keep in mind. The first is to really encourage self-serve. When you're working globally, you can't just always be there to answer any questions. So make it easy for stakeholders to help themselves if you aren't available for a quick call or a live chat. You want to plan ahead. Sometimes people are working a full day ahead of you. So there's a few overlapping moments and each one of them counts. So plan as much as you can to make sure that if you have any face-to-face time, you put it in the calendar so it won't get lost. And just get comfortable doing things more than once. If the team is split across regions, sometimes you do have to speak live and they want to hear directly from you. So you have to kind of do this kind of experience of sharing your insights or talking to them more than once and in every individual region. So just sometimes you'll have to schedule multiple repeating sessions, but this means you're really comfortable sharing your research. And I think it's a great skill anyway to practice your public speaking. So just get comfortable knowing that it's not going to be a one and done thing. It's going to keep going sometimes and more people will learn about your work as a result. Awesome. So now that I've shared a bunch of different tips and tricks with you, I kind of wanted to show you a real life example of how all this working globally works together. I showed you Fiona, and although she is a real designer, it was a hypothetical scenario of how it's the ideal relationship to work between a researcher and a designer. And now I kind of want to show you a real life project that I did this year, actually. So this year I focused on a foundational study that was focused more about learning about Zendesk agents. So this study actually did have to happen 100% remotely because of the pandemic, and it worked across 4 different teams that touched that agent experience. So this meant that I had to put additional focus on making sure the design and product partners felt included throughout the process, since it was such a big project with people I had never met face to face. So the way I was able to do this is that I did everything that I talked about in this presentation, but mostly I started with the stakeholders. So I spent 2 to 3 weeks setting up time to chat with different team members to learn about their questions, goals, and priorities. Any of these documents that the team members had shared with me to help me get up to date, I would then put into a research library that had all the existing knowledge about agents in one place. This library was then shared with everyone so that there's visibility into the work that's going on within each of the different teams. So even though I might have talked to someone in APAC and EMEA and AMER, they might not talk to each other. So this was a document that kind of kept everyone informed. And at the same time, I was working with the research ops team and the customer success team to make sure we were recruiting the right participants for this study. As I said earlier, we want to make sure our audience is just as global as our company. So setting those up and making sure that we can get everyone in the right time zone that is not exhausting for everyone who's helping out. And then after understanding all the team priorities and setting up recruiting on the back end, I conducted 60-minute interviews with the participants. So all the recordings obviously were shared and linked in the Confluence page. And then in addition, I actually conducted both a diary study and a shadowing session with the agents that stakeholders were able to watch. I actually personally shadowed agents for 2 hours as they worked through Zendesk, and that's not realistic for every partner to watch. So I put together a highlight reel with my voiceover, just kind of narrating what's happening of the shadowing session, so it's easy for them to watch. Those 2-hour sessions then became like a 5 to 10 minute little session that was a lot more digestible. And then after gathering all the data and making everything available, I worked with the team to organize a synthesis workshop where we came together to identify pain points, prioritize user needs, and develop how might we statements. This all led to a more collaborative understanding of the agent experience before the final report even came out. And of course, the final report did come out, and that's something that was definitely a deliverable for this project. But I think something that I want to share that I thought is really cool that I encourage a lot of other teams to do is that we're also developing an agent starter pack. So the agent is one of our participant type, but also a user that we designed for here at Zendesk. So we wanted to create the starter pack that makes it easier for future designers and product team members to learn about the agent experience from this research. So this kind of helps ensure that our work lives on beyond the study. And that's just kind of the way that we ran this study. This happened over the course of about 3 to 4 months. And we worked globally, never met anyone in person, worked with 21 different participants, and still had an amazing research project, all leveraging the things I talked about today. So definitely the hypothetical scenario, it's all good stuff. But those are kind of my top tips for working with a global audience. And I hope you really enjoyed it. Please let me know if you have any questions. As always, I'm Crystal Pang, a senior UX researcher at Zendesk. Thank you for coming.